North Korea plans an attack on the south. The Russian ambassador claims the U.S. wanted ISIS to win in Syria, and the war on cash spills over to our children's board games. This is SkyWatch TV for Thursday, February 18th, 2016. I'm Derek Gilbert. First up, a car bomb in Ankara, Turkey left at least 28 dead and 60 injured Wednesday. The bomb targeting several military buses while they were stopped at a traffic light. As expected, the Turkish government has blamed the Kurds and the Syrian government. Expect this to be used to justify an invasion of northern Syria. Prime Minister Ahmet Davutoglu said the bombing was clear evidence that the YPG, which is the Kurdish militia group in northern Syria, is a terrorist organization. Now, the Turks equate the YPG with the PKK, which is the Kurdish militia operating in northern Iraq, which is designated by the U.S. State Department as a terrorist organization. The YPG, however, is an ally of the United States in the fight against the Islamic State. Now, Turkey has been shelling YPG positions in northern Syria since the weekend and massing troops on the border with Syria. And as we reported yesterday, a Saudi-backed newspaper in London reported that the countdown to the Turkish Arab intervention, including Saudi troops, the countdown to that intervention nearing zero. The question, of course, is what happens if and when Russian troops or pilots come under fire from Turkish or Saudi troops? Russia still really hasn't responded in a military fashion to Turkey shooting down that Su-24 fighter bomber on November 24th. In southern Syria, tensions along the Israeli border are high. Russian warplanes have been bombing rebel positions in that area over the last week, forcing large numbers of refugees toward the borders of Jordan and Israel in the Golan Heights. The Jordanian army has seized several border crossings formerly held by Syrian rebels, which have reportedly dropped their weapons and are fleeing in all directions under the Russian onslaught. The Israeli Defense Force has put a blackout on news from its border crossing at Quneitra in the Golan Heights. And Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has sent the Director General of Israel's Foreign Ministry to find out what Russia's intentions are in the area. Dr. Dore Gold meets with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov in Moscow today, Thursday. And meanwhile, the Syrian Observatory on Human Rights, which admittedly is not the most reliable or unbiased source, claims that Israeli missiles hit a Syrian army outpost on the road between Damascus and the town of Daraa, which is on the border of Jordan. Now, the IDF hasn't commented on this incident, and the Syrian army and Hezbollah both deny that it happened. But if it's true, it might indicate that Israel is losing patience with what's happening just across the border from the Golan Heights and sending a message to Syria and Russia that it prefers the Syrian rebels on the border to a coalition of Syrian army troops, Hezbollah fighters, and the Iranian Republican Guard. Now, the Russian ambassador to the United Kingdom dropped a minor bombshell Monday, one that's gone completely unnoticed here in the West, just as the article by Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative journalist Seymour Hersh in the London Review of Books last month went totally unnoticed. The one where he said that, and quoted sources inside the Pentagon as saying that United States military commanders in the Pentagon have gone around the Obama administration and slipped information, intelligence on the rebels in Syria to the government of Bashar al-Assad, because the U.S. military is concerned what might follow if Bashar al-Assad is deposed. In fact, the Defense Intelligence Agency has been warning the Obama administration about this since at least August of 2012, based on emails obtained by the watchdog group Judicial Watch. Well, Ambassador Alexander Yakovenko, writing in the Evening Standard in London, wrote that the Obama administration advised the Russian government last summer that it expected the Islamic State to capture Damascus by last October. Now, that didn't happen. Maybe because of the intelligence being shared by the Pentagon. And then Ambassador Yakovenko adds, and I quote, "What they were planning to do next, we don't know. Probably they," meaning the Obama administration, "would have ended up painting the extremists white and accepting them as a Sunni state straddling Iraq and Syria," end quote. Yakovenko concludes that it was this possibility that prompted Russian President Vladimir Putin to intervene in Syria to prevent the Islamic State from taking over Syria. And of course, Russian intervention has in fact turned the tide of the war, giving democratic forces in Syria at least an opportunity to set the course for the future of that country. Now, remember that Ambassador Yakovenko is a politician. I'm not going to take his words at face value just because they happen to fit a preconceived notion or attitude that I might have about President Obama and his foreign affairs team. No doubt Ambassador Yakovenko is spinning the facts to make his government look good. And Russia, we should remember, has geopolitical goals in the Middle East that are not necessarily in line with what we in the United States would want to see in the Middle East. But certainly Russia benefits from keeping Bashar al-Assad in power. Now, the implication, that said, the implication that the United States wanted the Islamic State to take over Syria, to replace the government of Bashar al-Assad, is a big deal. And it might actually explain why the Russian Air Force has managed to do in less than 5 months what the United States Air Force did not do in more than a year and a half. And I don't believe it's because Russian pilots or Russian military equipment is better than what the United States government has available to it. And speaking of that part of the world, a report issued yesterday says that the U.S. government believes that the Islamic State used mustard gas last year in Iraq and Syria. One attack reportedly took place last August at a town north of Aleppo, where major fighting is taking place right now involving players from all sides: the Islamic State, the Kurds, Syrian army, Hezbollah, Iran, and possibly the Turkish army. Another attack occurred inside Iraq, where it would have been the first use of a chemical weapon since the days of Saddam Hussein. And if that wasn't disturbing enough, the government of Iraq is searching for highly dangerous radioactive material that was stolen last year. It was in a case the size of a laptop computer, located in a storage facility in the southern Iraqi town of Basra, owned by a U.S.-based oil field services company. This material is used in a device that scans steel pipe flanges and fittings used in oil pipelines for flaws in the steel. There's no indication that this material has gotten into the hands of the Islamic State. It's possible that some poor schlub thought he would steal something that he could sell on the black market, make a few bucks to support his family, and that he doesn't know what he's got his hands on. And frankly, he could be dead within a few days if he's not handling it in the right way. South Korea's National Intelligence Service is reportedly seeing disturbing signs across the border with North Korea. The NIS told a South Korean lawmaker that Kim Jong-un has ordered the North Korean military to plan wide-scale terror attacks against the South, targeting subways, shopping malls, power plants, and other targets. Hostility between the two states has been growing since North Korea successfully tested a nuclear weapon last month. And the war on cash continues. As I told you earlier this week, prominent bankers and economists are beating a drum, calling for the elimination of actual folding money. We saw it with the European Central Bank voting to eliminate the 500 euro note. They're telling us that actual physical cash is archaic, outdated, and only helps criminals launder money used in drug dealing, terrorism, and tax evasion. Well, adding his voice to this chorus is Harvard professor and former U.S. Treasury Secretary Lawrence Summers, wrote an op-ed piece in the Washington Post earlier this week claiming that high-denomination notes, like the $100 bill, would disrupt business models of bad guys engaged in illicit activity. Ban the Benjamin. Now, excuse me, but just looking at my Bible tells me that crime predates cash. Crime will continue long after cash is eliminated. This movement would just limit crime to those who actually control the digital currency that replaces physical folding money. In other words, central bankers and the governments that they lend money to. Keynesian economics is pushing bankers into an insane spiral, pushing interest rates between banks into negative territory. Interest rates on savings accounts in some places also moving into negative territory. It's a desperate attempt to get you and me spending money to reinvigorate the economy before it slides into depression. Oops, I used that D word. Now, based on the house of cards supporting the financial system, a depression appears to be imminent. Global trade has collapsed, as evidenced by the record low index that tracks the rates of shipping on cargo ships between nations, and the year-on-year performance of banks is worse now. It was worse in 2015 than it was in 2008, just before the economy went off the cliff. And yet, this is not deterring the powers that be. The war on cash, negative interest rate policy, or NIRP, is becoming widely accepted among influential financiers, and it's gone so far as to affect our children's board games. Yes, board games being used to indoctrinate our children into the idea that cash is bad. This is the newest version of the classic board game Monopoly, called Monopoly Ultimate Banking. Monopoly money replaced in this game by a small ATM and cash cards that track a player's net worth throughout the games. Land on boardwalk with somebody's hotel on it, swipe your card, it moves the money from your account to your opponent's account. Now, there might be some advantages to here, really. I mean, I always really get irritated by really weird house rules about what happens when you land on free parking. But, and it also would prevent, say, sneaking a few $100 bills when your sister turns her back. Not that I ever did that, Sandy, just so you know. But the message is clear. The only fair system is one where the banks have total control over every financial transaction. Cash is bad. Debit cards are good. Oh, yes, and perhaps an implanted chip would be even better, harder to steal. Are you ready for your mark? One final note on the passing of Justice Antonin Scalia. I don't want to keep beating this drum. On Monday, I rejected the idea of a conspiracy. On Tuesday, I backtracked a bit because some homicide investigators in New York City and Washington, D.C. said it was unusual that an autopsy had not been performed, which is usually standard procedure when someone dies with no witnesses present, as in the case of Justice Scalia. And yet there are still some in the alternative media who are making claims that just are not substantiated by what we know to be true. The most outrageous claim being that Justice Scalia has been cremated, thereby destroying evidence of his murder. This happens not to be the case. And I would suggest to my colleagues in the alternative media that we double check our facts a little more carefully before we represent things as true, especially when you're making claims of murder and throwing around accusations. Justice Scalia has not been cremated. In fact, his body will lie in repose at the Supreme Court on Friday to be followed by a funeral mass on Saturday in accordance with his Roman Catholic faith. Now, it is still irregular that no autopsy was performed, but that's as far as I'm going to go with it. Next week on SkyWatch TV, we continue our conversation with Reverend Dr. Robert Bennett, Lutheran pastor, Lutheran theologian, who's written a couple of very important books documenting the reality and the scriptural basis for demonic possession and exorcism. This week we talk about how you and me as Christians are actually performing exorcistic acts as part of worship without even knowing it. SkyWatch TV airs multiple times next week. Let's run these down for you. The Cornerstone Television Network, Wednesdays at 3:30 p.m. The Victory Television Network, covering most of Arkansas and the Memphis area, Mondays at 8:30 p.m., Tuesdays at 6:30 p.m., and Saturday at 3:30 p.m. And the Christian Television Network, Tuesdays at 8:30 p.m. and Saturdays at 7:30 p.m., all times Central. And for a complete channel listing of where you can see SkyWatch TV on these networks, log on to skywatchtv.com. Well, you'll see it in the top menu bar at SkyWatch TV. And of course, the program for the week will be available on Monday morning at the SkyWatch TV channel on Roku. And for instructions on how to add the channel to your Roku account, log on to skywatchtv.com/Roku. During the month of February, our gift to you, for your gift to us, is this 8-inch tall resin cross, made to look like stone and carved with the central message of the gospel, John 3:16. Is our gift to you for any donation, a donation of any amount during the month of February while supplies last. For instructions on donating, please log on to skywatchtv.com/donate. And the voting continues in the 37th Annual Telly Awards. Of course, the documentary film produced by SkyWatch TV and Defender Films, Inhuman, The Next and Final Phase of Man is Here, is nominated and also up in the People's Choice category. And that's where you can help us. You'll find a link at the very top of the SkyWatch TV website. Follow that link to the website for the Telly Awards and rate the film Inhuman, The Next and Final Phase of Man is Here. And thank you for helping us spread the message, the warning about the transhumanist movement to the rest of the world. And you can also help us by clicking on the website. We post things here, skywatchtv.com, Of course, our Twitter feed, our Facebook page, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you're watching this on YouTube, you see this little button here in the corner? Click that. You'll get a notice then once you sign up every time we post one of these daily updates or our regular program to our SkyWatch TV channel on YouTube. Tomorrow, Sci Friday. Sharon Gilbert joins me in studio as we discuss the top science stories of the week, and we look forward to your comments, questions, and suggestions. My email address, dgilbert@skywatchtv.com. Thank you for watching as we keep watch. I'm Derek Gilbert, and this is SkyWatch TV.